Hey guys, my name is Nibiri and it's time for another kicking of the week, and today we're gonna take a journey back in time and start making a kick the old school way. So for today I already prepared some things, and as you can see I made 3 layers, and I want to show you how I made these 3 layers. And after that we're gonna combine them and just add some distortion to glue them together. But first let's just start with the 909s. So for the 909 I like to use EQS9, and that's just basically because back in the day when I was making kicks this way, I just like to use this plugin. And well, the thing that's important for choosing your plugin to get your 909 is just these few knobs, like the decay, the sustain, and that kind of thing. You can also use Drumazon because it has the same functions. And you can even use kick too, because in there you can play around with your decay and everything as well to just shape that kick so that it shapes your distortion a little bit. That's the only thing you need to keep in mind when you choose a plugin to get a 909. Just choose a plugin that's a little bit versatile and has these options for the decay and the sustain. So let's just start with our first layer. And of course the first layer from the beginning sounds like this. It's just that basic 909, and the first thing that I do is I just like to distort it a little bit, and well, I just distort it all the way with a distortion, and it's just there to get that first crunch. So right now it sounds like a basic distorted 909, nothing special yet. And before that I like to add an EQ, so I just add the distortion and slide an EQ in front. And I just like to draw some peaks to just start creating some resonances that will create the crunch of our tail that we're going to be creating. So right now this sounds like shit, but in the full spectrum, these peaks that we're putting over here are just already there to create that basic crunch in the end. And after this distortion, I just like to use that EQ and distort technique that basically everyone uses to create their hardstyle kicks. But what I like to do as well is just sometimes take an EQ or a distortion or anything and just slide it in between the chain that I already made. So I might end up sliding this tantrum like I did, for example, from the back over here all the way in between to just create a little bit of a different sound. And that's why sometimes in my chains you see like 2 distortions afterwards and 2 EQs at the same moment. But what I basically did after this distortion was of course add another EQ to just shape our sound further. And what's the most annoying thing about creating a hardstyle kick the old school way is that you can't just try to replicate it. If you're gonna try to make this same EQ and just move some of these points an inch or just a little bit of a different frequency, your kick is gonna sound entirely different. So just be prepared when you want to make a kick this way that you're gonna spend a lot of time fiddling around and making the sound perfect, because all these little peaks and dips and things really work together to create a nice crunch. So I don't just really add an EQ and start playing around, because then you can't really hear what it's gonna sound like after a distortion again. So I basically just add an EQ, and after that I immediately add my next distortion to just make some more distortion. And as you can see, I'm just opening the soft clip all the way, I'm even opening the mix all the way. And we're just using some really loud distortion in general. But after that, I added the distortion. I'm just gonna play around inside the EQ and tweak this until it sounds how I wanted it to sound at this stage. So to just basically show you how it would work in an EQ, at this stage at least, I would just take a blank EQ and I would start drawing some peaks. And let's just do that together, and you're gonna see how quickly an EQ can get complicated, but also how you can't really copy it because it's really sensitive. And just these 5 points already show you that it's just a really fiddly process, and it's fun to do, but it's just something you need to keep in mind. So like this, I'm playing around inside of an EQ and just shaping that sound just bit by bit until it sounds like how I wanted it. And well, right now you can even see that I'm using 2 different EQs on the same sound, and they both just look quite different already. So yeah, you just have to play around with EQs until it sounds how you want it to sound. It's just a matter of playing around until you have it sounding like you want it to sound. So I'm having this EQ, and to just make this a little bit more complicated, I like to add some movement in here, and that's just because we need movement for our hardstyle kick. And even though these dips and peaks already create some movement inside the 909, I like to move these peaks a little bit more to just create some more movement. And I have this automation clip over here, and this little automation clip moves this point at the gain side, so it's moving down a little bit as the kick progresses. So that's just to create some extra movement, and it's just gonna stand out when the entire distortion progress is done. So after this, we're just adding another EQ again and just another distortion. So I like to just add that distortion and just slide the EQ in between. And something that's really important when you want to create a hardstyle kick this way is playing around with the tone. The tone, as far as I know, is just basically like a low cut, and it just plays around with your phasing a little bit and just the low end of the kick in general. So just play around with the tone inside of distortion at least, and just see if you can get it to sound a little bit different, and if it's just emphasizing your crunch in a different way. That's the only way that I'm using it. I'm just adding some distortion and maybe playing around with the tone to just see if my crunch just sounds a little bit different. So then we go back into EQ, and in this EQ, it's actually quite simple again, but I just made some extra movement over here. So this green peak over here in the EQ is just moving down so that it's emphasizing a little bit more of the growly frequencies inside of the tail. But right now it still sounds just like an overly distorted 909, but it's already sounding decent. Then afterwards I added some sub, but what I did in the meantime as well is adding this tantrum and this Pro Q. Now let's just add the Pro Q first, because this Pro Q has just a low cut, and that might seem a little bit weird, but this low cut is just playing around just like that tone and just changing the phasing, and changing that phasing is just gonna change the entire way that your kick is having a crunch in there. So I just added this, and right now we take the 909 sound from this and we're just changing it into this. So it's already a lot more characteristic, and yeah, I'm basically just adding this EQ somewhere in between making the chain and yeah, just sliding it in there and just playing around a little bit with it to just see if it emphasizes my crunches the right way. And after that I added a tantrum, and this tantrum is just kind of using the same way, same methods. It's playing around a little bit with the phasing and just a little bit with the drive amount for the distortion, and we're just playing around with this so it just creates a little bit of a different crunch again. And after that we end up with this. So that's a lot more characteristic for our first layer for our kick. Now let's start talking about the second layer, but as a lot of this is just the same thing, like the whole thought process is the same, I'm just gonna move around this just a little bit quicker so that we have a more quick tutorial. And well, basically I just started with the distortion again, but right now I just wanted to do a little bit of a different distortion, because distortion is alright, but sometimes you want to play with something else as well. So I just like to use Rift, and what I basically did was just play around through the distortion wavefolding options and add 6 stages and just make it a little bit of an intense distortion. Basically for that first step we just want an extreme distortion, because that just creates that first character bit of our sound. So we add this EQ with just a little peak, and after that we add our distortion for our first step of this 909. And it's already having a little bit of movement in the back, but it's gonna create a little bit too much of a fuzzy sound. You're gonna hear it in a little bit. And well, over here I just play around with some basic EQing to just create a better sound. And after that I added a distortion, and this distortion is quite loud, and this way I hoped to create a nice crunch, but it just didn't really work out that way. So in the end we're gonna end up sliding the classic chorus and the tantrum in between there to emphasize that crunch again. So right now we're just gonna go on like how I made this layer and just add this EQ first so that you can really hear how I shape this sound. And well, just playing around inside the EQ again, dipping where I felt it needed it, and just adding an distortion afterwards. We're creating our crunch step by step. But that just didn't really sound that nice yet until now. And I sometimes just like to add a chorus. And the chorus is just, again, playing a little bit with the phasing because it's making that chorus effect inside the till. And that way it's just gonna make your crunch sound different. So sometimes you can use a chorus as well, but remember that with a chorus, it's just gonna change the kick every time you play the kick. So sometimes when you want to record your kick, you have to record a few takes of that kick until you get the right one. But yeah, adding a chorus made this happen. And that's just shit. So I'm gonna mute this for now. And well, I'm just gonna show you the settings in here. As you see, I just play around a little bit with the delay inside of a chorus to just create a better crunch. And after that, I added a tantrum, and this tantrum was just there to distort a little bit. So adding this tantrum, it sounds like this. That didn't really do too much special to the sound yet, but the chorus just really made the crunch move a lot more. And although this will sound really distorted with the noise in between, yeah, I'm just gonna play this so that you can hear how I created this crunch layer. So it's basically just recording that and taking one of these takes and then using that as a layer for our till. And then we have our final layer, and the final layer is the most easy layer. It's basically just the warm layer for these 3 little layers. And what I did inside EQS9 is just make it a little bit longer with the decay. And then inside the chain, we just added one distortion, and this distortion is just, yeah, it's on there and it's making it a little bit more warm. Just a general 909 distorted sound. Really can't make this anything different. And it sounds like this. So that's just a really basic 909 sound. And we're going to be using this layer to just use it as a clean sub underneath our layers. And to start layering, we basically have just 3 way too long layers. And as you can see, all these crunches aren't just really prepared hardstyle tills already. So we need to do that. And what we need to do in this step is just open our mind creatively to listen to certain parts in our sound. So right now, this beginning might sound alright, but we're working on a till. So somewhere in the back over here, we want to find the right part of this sample that will work as a till. So I personally really like this part over here where it just starts being a little bit more fuzzy. So you just want to listen creatively and see which parts of sounds you want to use. So over here, I did this part for this little crunch. And that's just because you want to have some movement in there. So just take these right bits and just move them underneath each other and just layer them to create a nice till sound. So we're just gonna start off with this one. And what I basically just really did was just loop this. And already just play this like it's a full till. So we're gonna listen if this already sounds right. If we don't, maybe need to move it a little bit like this. We're just listening to this. And then we're agreeing that this sounds alright for this point right now, for example. And then we just add the other one underneath here. And we're just gonna scroll through this and just see what works. This could work as well, although like I'd chosen before, it's just a little bit of the shorter version of this fuzzy part. So yeah, we're just playing around like that and just playing around until it sounds right. And I'm just gonna stick with this. And after that, it's the same with our low end from the warm layer. And we're just moving this in the right phasing underneath here. So that it's just yeah, working together with the rest of our tail. And now that we have our 3 layers, we're just gonna move them around a little bit with the gain, because it's right now they're really just too static. They're too combined that you don't really hear the right crunches, and you don't really hear which layer is contributing to the entire sound. So I'm just gonna mute the warm layer that we have over here, and we're just gonna play around with these first 2 to get that crunch imbalance, and yeah, just glue it together a little bit. And we can also use an EQ for this, so we can take a Pro Q2, and because these still are just a little bit of a different part of the frequency with their crunch, we can maybe dip this a little bit, where the other one will just peak up a little bit more, so we just give them some more space to really work together. So right now we're already just a little bit more balanced with our crunch, and after that I just like to use that warm layer to just glue them together just a little bit, and then we're gonna make this a whole buzz. So right now we're taking the layers, putting them in a buzz, and we're maybe just gonna add some distortion to just see what happens. And if it's just too complicated, we're just gonna come back to this later. And we're gonna start working on this tail a lot more in other videos. So right now with this easy distortion, it's just gonna sound a lot more like one sound. It's just basically gluing them together, but that's just the first step to create a full kick the old school way. So we're gonna come back to this later, and well, I hope you liked this and learned something from this, and hopefully I'll see you back soon again. Cheers!